Hello peeps, welcome back to Big Deck Playa with me, Matt Sparks. This week we are taking a look at a GvG ramp deck for Druids. So here we are. Now in classic style for ramp Druids, you always have to have 2 Innovates and 2 Wild Growth in the deck. Otherwise it's not really a ramp Druid. And you kind of want to get these in your hand as early as possible. Maybe not so much the Innovates, but definitely the Wild Growth. You want to try and get those in your hand as early as possible. So I would try a mulligan to get those, because the sooner you get those mana crystals means the sooner you can get some of your bigger creatures out. We have 2 Wrath for a little bit of early removal and possibly card draw, although I tend to find that I'm using the dealing 3 damage more often than I am doing the 1 damage and drawing a card. Yeah, these are really useful for early game removal. 2 Savage Roar, this is more of a late game finisher. You'll probably use this more in late game for finishing off your opponent than you will for doing anything else. But it can also be used to just give your minions that little bit of extra attack to take out enemy minions, if they've got a little bit of extra health, perhaps. We have 1 Big Game Hunter, usually saved towards the late game for getting rid of big threats like the Ironwood Protector or a Ragnaros or something like that. Can be very useful for that sort of thing. 2 Shade of Naxxramas. Again, you want to try and get these fairly early, because the sooner you get them on the board, the sooner they can become a bit of a threat. So when you're mulliganing, I would suggest trying to keep Wild Growths and Shade of Naxxramas in your hand and get rid of anything else. 2 Swipe, because what would a Druid deck be without Swipe? It's one of the best 4 cost spells in my opinion. Does lots of damage to a main target and then a little bit of damage to everything else. Especially useful against like Zoo and Rush decks, because a lot of those have 1 or 2 health, so it's pretty nice to get rid of those. 2 Keeper of the Grove, because you've got to have those silence. 2/4 is fairly good for stats, because it gives it a little bit of survivability, and it should be able to trade well with a lot of the lower cost minions that might already be on the board. And having the silence, having 2 silence in the deck is always useful, because there's always plenty of stuff with death rattles and stuff like sludge belchers, which are always really annoying. 2 Piloted Shredders. Now you probably didn't expect to see this in the Druid deck, because quite honestly I didn't expect to see it in the Druid deck either, but it's there. Now I've found that the Piloted Shredders seem to act as a bit of a soft taunt, because almost every time I've put it out, it's either been polymorphed or silenced or just like shut down just really quickly. And I'm guessing that it's just because it summons another minion afterwards, but I don't know. I don't know quite why it's getting shut down so fast. You know, 4/3 isn't that good for a 4 cost minion. I mean, Yeti has an extra 2 health, so I don't know. But it's in the deck, so that's what I'm using. I quite like these Shredders. I like their kind of death rattle gimmick. I like that idea. But yes, it can be a little bit random, and you can sometimes end up with something that's not all that great, like a Doomsayer, which is not good at all. 5 cost, we have 2 Druid of the Claw, because it's the Druid deck, so you got to have Druid of the Claw because they're awesome. And then my favourite combo, we have a Loatheb at 5 mana, because it's 5/5 for 5, and makes sure enemy spells cost 5 more mana. So Loatheb is a fantastic card. Always love Loatheb. And following that, we have 2 Sludge Belchers, which again are just fantastic cards, and I love them. So we got plenty of taunt to slow down your opponents should you find that you need to. We have 2 Force of Nature. Again, these are probably best used late game for a finisher, but quite often I find that sometimes I don't have like a silence, I don't have my Keeper of the Grove ready, or I don't have a swipe in my hand, so sometimes you have to use a Force of Nature to get rid of something big, or something scary, or something that's just a pain, like a Sludge Belcher. So yes, it's always nice to have those, but I generally try and keep them for late game to combo with the Savage Roar, which is very nice combo indeed, because then you can get 12 damage out. And because they've got charge, it's great. So that's 12 damage straight to the face. Boom, done. Game over. 6 cost, we have a Sylvanas Windrunner. A 5/5 for 6 that takes control of a random enemy minion when it dies. Sylvanas is really awkward to play around unless you've got a silence or some kind of like hex or polymorph or something like that. So yeah, she's pretty good. Although, to be honest, I haven't had a huge amount of opportunity to play her whilst playing this deck. Most of the time, if I do get her into my hand, I don't really need to play her because I've got like board control. So yeah, I mean, it's nice. It's a nice kind of counter to play when if your opponent brings out like a Ragnaros or something. That could be quite useful because obviously if Ragnaros kills Sylvanas, then you take control of Ragnaros, which is pretty nice. We have 2 Ancient of Lore for a little bit of card draw or a little bit of health restoration, because sometimes you need just that little bit of extra health just to keep you going until you can pull out your big cards. We have a GvG card in the form of Dr. Boom. Now I realise that not everyone is likely to have Dr. Boom yet, because the game, the GvG expansion hasn't been out that long. But he certainly seems to be quite popular, and it seems to be turning up in quite a lot of decks. So I would suggest that you do what I've done and try and craft one as soon as you can, because it just seems to pop up in everything. And a 7/7 for 7 is pretty solid, and the boom bots are pretty awesome too. At 8 cost, we have a Ragnaros the Firelord, because it's Ragnaros, and he's always a pain for your opponent. And then finally we have a Cenarius. So Cenarius is pretty cool, and like almost every other Druid card, you get the option of either having one effect or another. Most of the time I think I play the Treants with Taunt, just because most of the time when I get to turn 9, if I'm in a good position, I'm probably going to finish them off. I'm probably don't need to use Cenarius for that. I think I'd probably rather use Force of Nature and Savage Roar combo to buff my minions rather than using Cenarius. So yeah, I think Cenarius is generally used, well, I generally use it as a more defensive card. But that's the deck. It's pretty similar to most other ramp decks, to be honest. I mean, there's only really the addition of Dr. Boom and the piloted shredders that really make this any different to any other ramp druid. But it's a pretty solid deck. I think in the higher ranks you'll probably do better with this than you do at the lower ranks. In the lower ranks there's all sorts of weird and wonderful decks being played, because obviously people are experimenting with stuff. So I would recommend, once you get into sort of like rank 10-ish, maybe, I mean, I've been playing this at rank 13 and having mixed results, but I think the higher up you get, the better it'll do. So bear that in mind. But I'm having a lot of fun with it, and I would suggest that you give it a try. Let me know how you get on. If you make any videos using this deck, please feel free to share them with me, tweet me, and I shall check them out. If you want to see more about this deck, there is a link in the description, so you can head over to hearthstone.com and check it out. Always give it a plus rating, because it's always useful. I will see you next week for some more Big Deck Player. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.